Hello everybody, thank you very much for tuning in to this webinar with us here at Assess First. I'm very excited to have you all listening. We're going to today look together about the way in which you can recruit in a more exclusive way. So just a quick introduction. Oh, there you go. My name is Becca, Global Account Manager at Assess First. Now, I'm not sure how many of you already know about what we do here at Assess First, but very quickly, in a quick summary, we're a company specializing in predictive recruitment. So what we've done is we've developed a solution that allows you to predict the capacity of somebody to be successful, happy, and engaged within a specific role, really focusing truly upon looking at increasing diversity in the recruitment process. So today we're going to cover the following three topics. First of all, we're going to talk about a recent study that we've conducted here at Assess First. And this study has allowed us to really understand diversity within the workplace, what the situation is today, and how we can look to improve and include this talking point in our existing recruitment process. I shall then talk through the different types of diversity that exist and, most importantly, their impact. And then once we've covered these two topics, I shall consider how do we start, or where do we start, and in some cases, continue to really consider diversity in our recruitment process. So I'll take questions at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to type those questions at the in the little Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. And I'll try and cover as many as I can at the end, and if any that I haven't covered, I'll make sure that we respond to later today directly via email. So to start, the study that we conducted at Assess First. So this is a study that we have created across the British population, across the months of September and October of last year. And we questioned a total of 3,419 individuals. And we were interested in and analysed the point of view, so the perspective of recruiters, but also the point of view of the candidates. Now, the first thing which is interesting to note is 96% of recruiters that were asked thought that diversity was really important and had a true impact in the success of a company. And just to note, an average of 50% believe that diversity was an essential factor to consider in the recruitment process, and believe that a team can't evolve or can't be the best that they can be without this element of diversity. So clearly, it's a talking point. The first question that we asked is, what issues do you face when recruiting? And that is interesting because we can see all of the different factors that we proposed included in the study as follows. So salary expectations here of 32%, communication with managers, which again is interesting, maybe the buy-in of those hiring managers sat at 29% in terms of issues faced when recruiting, low budget 26%, and questionable candidate experience 24%. Now, what above and beyond all of that, which was really interesting, was the fact that 60% remarked that they were just not seeing enough candidates. So that includes both general candidate numbers and also lack of quality candidates. Parallel to that, 61% of recruiters remarked that they had never recruited an atypical profile. And it's true that possibly could be questioned because, okay, we know that there are potentially not enough candidates applying. We've just seen that. But at the same time, the fact that maybe the focus isn't upon an atypical profile, well, there's some actions to follow there, some opportunity. The next question we posed for you, what is an atypical profile? And here, what is really interesting is across these five aspects, what were truly noted as an atypical profile, well, was those with various experience and reorientation. Those are most heavily weighted. You can see in white here the recruiters' answers, and interestingly so, the comparison between those and then the answers and percentages for the candidates. So in the various experience here, 75% was weighted for recruiters and 52% for candidates. So clearly that was their general understanding of what an atypical profile was. Now, next to that, there were also other factors that we proposed in the survey that may have been considered the definition of an atypical profile. Sexual orientation, gender, ethnicity, age, disability, typical associations when it comes to this meaning of diversity. What's interesting is actually this was what the scoring sat when thinking about these elements in this explanation or understanding of what atypical profiles were. Actually, sexual orientation, for example, only scored 5%, gender only 7%. So, what makes it difficult in your context to recruit atypical profiles? That was the next question. And you can see here again, communication with managers comes up as the number one factor from a recruiter's perspective. Certain managers may not be very open when considering atypical profiles. So again, coming back to this question of buy-in. Lack of candidates, 24%. That's again something that comes popping up. Another question, have you already implemented solutions to diversify the profiles you recruit? This is rather interesting. Already put in place, you can see is 35%, so it's pretty high. But if we look at the other end of the spectrum, you can see not even planned or not at all, 45%. But I think we're very much aware, 96% of those individuals have answered that, it is going to be affecting our results. So hopefully this figure will in the future look to rise or look to be pushed into those areas whereby there will be projects on the go, or that one day this element of focus upon diversity will be implemented. Next question, do you have a budget dedicated to recruit more atypical profiles? 88% said no, answered no. What actions do you have or would you like to take? And this was quite interesting. So specialized events, so looking at events that really focus in on looking at a different audience of candidates, sat at 34%. Partnerships with certain associations, 43%, and soft skills-based recruitment, 47%, which is something that we'll touch upon later in the webinar. And then from a candidate's perspective, do you feel that the atypical aspect of your profile has influenced your career? 34% says yes. So obviously, candidates feel it's pretty detrimental to them. So affected them here at these levels here when thinking about why or how. Finding a suitable job, 50% have said that has been affected. The interview process, the desirability of their profile, their career progression, and also the feedback that they then receive off of the back of an application. And then again, from a candidate's perspective, do you feel that companies avoid recruiting atypical profiles? And this is a whopping 64%. So even for those companies who aren't necessarily avoiding atypical profiles, who really have a focus on it, what's interesting is the perception that the candidates have, that they feel that it's actually the inverse. And when we ask why they have that opinion, they feel that maybe companies, 54% feel that companies may have a fear of a recruitment error. 42% may be due to the company culture that's already instilled within the business that they're applying for. And 39% feel that there may be a tendency to clone, or a worry from the business's point of view that they will just recruit that same individual. Again, from a candidate's perspective, when considering these barriers, is it up to the company to break them down, or for you to get around? And that's really interesting. And here we have pretty much a big 50-50. You can see that 50% feel that it's the company's responsibility, but also the other half feel that actually it's their personal responsibility to have to adapt to that. So that's it for the results of this survey. We shall be releasing these findings and figures in the next couple of weeks on LinkedIn and in our newsletter. So if you're not signed up to our LinkedIn page, I certainly would recommend that you do that to keep up to date with our studies, articles, and white papers that we produce. I'll leave you with those responses to have a little bit of a think about those, and I'll now delve further into a couple of questions we posed there regarding this definition of diversity and the different types of diversity that exists. So, as we saw in the results of the survey, 96% of people think that diversity is important for the success of their business. And so with that in mind, it's really important to understand how diversity can impact businesses, and even more so, which difference makes an actual difference. So today, what I want to talk through and what you, I guess, must be aware of are the three main types of diversity that exist. Now, just to note, there are several different types of diversity that have been identified in studies, but these three are considered the most distinguished. So the first is the diversity that is considered visible or surface. So to be more precise, we're talking about differences that are immediately observable. So differences that are easy to measure, differences such as age of an individual, gender, sexuality. Now, the second type of diversity is what we call mid-diversity. Now, these differences are slightly more complicated to establish. You'll find these sorts of information on individual CVs, the school they went to, the university they studied at, and their previous work history or knowledge of a subject. Again, really much dependent and focused upon their previous experience. And the third type of diversity is what we call the profound diversity. And this type of diversity isn't necessarily observable by the naked eye and is defined as the psychology diversity. So factors like personality, style of cognitive ability, or their capacity to understand and really use knowledge. Now, when we look at the impact of these different levels of diversity on efficiency or on the functioning of teams, there is a little bit of a problem. So when we consider the reoccurrence of these different diversity types, and when we say recurrence, we're meaning the considered importance of these different types of diversity in the workplace today. So we will see that surface diversity is the rated the highest, the most considered the most important in society. The average is the mid type of diversity, and then the deep level is actually rated the lowest, so very weak in its considered importance today. So, for example, if you were to cross someone, let's say on the street, and you were to ask them what diversity means to them, it's likely that they will define it as what we have presented here in front of us. So that's surface level, all of those different levels of diversity that are observable. Now, where we have a little bit of a problem is when we consider the actual impact of these types of diversity. So we can see that previous to what we just saw in terms of people's perception of what diversity is, well, the impact of these different types of diversity are in fact the opposite on success of businesses and teams. So you can see here that surface level, so again, that very easily observable diversity, actually has a really low impact on efficiency and figures. Mid has an average as before, and actually the diversity that has the highest impact is that of the profound diversity. So that focus upon the invisible factors, things like personality, things of style of cognitive ability, and somebody's capacity to understand and use knowledge. That actually has the biggest impact in terms of success on businesses. What we're now going to focus on is this last type of diversity, the profound diversity, because clearly that makes the biggest difference. How can the personality, the cognitive style of an individual help you to construct teams that are efficient and ultimately high performing? So I'm going to now talk about a little study that was conducted in and around the 60s by a gentleman called Richard HOFFMAN. Now, I don't know if there's any psychologists on the webinar, but Richard HOFFMAN conducted a simulation of different types of teams. So he took two teams. The first team in this study was a team homogeneous and had resembling similar personalities. And then the second team was a team who had different personalities, so contrasting personalities. Now, he gave them two exercises to complete. The first exercise was a problem-solving exercise, and the second exercise was a role-play based upon conflict resolution, ultimately with the goal of the exercise being to find a solution for all of those team members involved. Now, he also assessed 2 types of efficiency indicators for each exercise, for each team. 2 indicators of different efficiency were measured. You can see here, the first indicator was that of the objective performance, so the production, the productivity. So that meaning the work of the team, did the team manage to find the solution, the quantity of the work that was actually realized, how many different propositions were proposed by the team, and the speed of execution of the task. And then, in addition, the second indicator was something called or that we refer to as a social indicator. So the general satisfaction was measured, the general efficiency of the team, and the affinity between the team members. Were they good? Did they get on? Were they all in agreement at the final result? And what was the difference between the homogeneous team and that team with a lot of different personalities? And actually, the difference in these results were pretty obvious. The average between the inhomogeneous team, so the team that had a variety in terms of personalities and cognitive ability, actually portrayed a quality of work that was 42% superior. And exactly the same for the quantity of work, so the number of solutions that were actually created, again, 42% superior. The number of innovative ideas found was 88% superior. And then finally, the speed of execution of the solutions, 113% superior. The inhomogeneous team found a solution within 22 minutes, and the homogeneous team, so the team with similar personalities, took 46 minutes on average to complete the tasks. So what we ended up with was a boosted level of productivity considering all of these factors here, an increase and impressive figures when it comes to the actual operational strength of that team. But there is also a gap between this impact on productivity and the one that HOFFMAN found on this team when considering satisfaction. Because he realized that actually in the inhomogeneous team, where all of the personalities and the cognitive abilities were different, on average, they rated their team satisfaction 15% lower. And so what we find is that there is a boost in performance, but an engagement and satisfaction level between the team members that is considered less. So I guess the thing to understand is how can we control this scoring of engagement while still ensuring that we maximize the production and efficiency of a team? And what we really need to establish is this contradiction of results, this difference between engagement scoring and level of productivity, is that normal? And quite simply, the answer is yes. Now we're going to delve into the psychology of it all. Because in the realms, the world of psychology, we can speak of something that we call and have in existence called the similarity principle. So in general, every day-to-day basis, whether in personal life, whether in professional life, we are engaged and attracted by those individuals and those things who resemble us and our personal ideas. Similarity is generally, I guess it could be considered as a real social magnet that can create all kinds of relationships. For example, people will tend to marry those who look similar to themselves. They will have friendship groups, go out with people who are similar. And therefore, if we're surrounded by those who have and believe in the same values and, the same things as us, the same way as us, then it will reassure us as individuals that actually our values, our beliefs, well, they're correct. Now, on the contrary, when we dislike somebody who is similar to us, it will put us in a psychological state that is pretty difficult to manage. And that is why we're all inclined to seek those who are similar to us. And I guess that's why people on homogeneous teams who are surrounded by the same personalities will automatically report higher levels of satisfaction. Now, the problem is that is a complete biased conception of reality. And what's funny is that is representative in real life situations. So, as an example, we're going to take this team here that consists of the following 6 individuals. They have all worked together for a couple of years, and therefore they know each other well. They know how they behave. They know how they work on a day-to-day basis. And the day that you will introduce a new team member, let's take Sammy here, you will find that there will be one of two different situations in front of this team. So the first is that new team members have a similar profile in terms of personality and cognitive style to those individuals in the team. So the team, when asked actually what their performance and effectiveness will be, they will perceive it as being a lot higher. And they will say that since Sammy's arrival into the team, their performance has increased, when actually what will happen is their real performance will be a lot lower than their perception. Yet because they are similar profiles, they will believe that they get on better and therefore that their performance is a lot higher. Now, the second case is if Sammy, this new team member, has a complementary profile in comparison to the team. And what will happen here is the team will automatically, naturally perceive their performance to decrease since his arrival. However, in real life, their actual performance will be a lot higher because there will be this diversity in profiles. So you're going to tell me that it's quite different, quite difficult, because we are talking about unconscious, psychological, intrinsic mechanisms. But good news, because today it's actually possible to build an intelligent approach to diversity. And by intelligent, I mean a diversity that really maximizes the gain in productivity, whilst also maximizing this gain in satisfaction, this gain on engagement. And for that, we will have to create two types of compatibility between individuals and assess two types of compatibility between people. So the first type is the compatibility of values. Now, our personalities can be different, but if you want to get high quality teams, you will have to focus in on the motivations that people have in common. And as I mentioned previously, we all have a tendency to seek with similarities. Working with those with similar values to ours would be beneficial and make us feel more comfortable. If you try to associate two people that have two similar personalities and motivations, they will get along very well. It will be extremely natural for them to work together, but their effectiveness of their work together may not be as effective as it could be. On the contrary, if you try to associate two collaborative individuals that have complementary behaviors and motivations, the collaboration may not last very long because it will be extremely difficult to work together. So what's going to be interesting and most beneficial is to associate people who have complementary behaviors, different personalities, and find similarities in terms of motivations, in terms of aspirations that they share, in terms of what they want to do on a day-to-day basis. Now, just a personal example at Assess First. So these two guys work together here. They have different personalities. Definitely, I can vouch for that. And on a daily basis, they will have and do certainly take different approaches. But they have almost the same aspirations that you can see here, convergent aspirations, and they are set into motion by the same drivers. And in fact, today, these two actually work the best at Assess First, considering their behaviors and their aspirations and their general work output, because they manage to transform those differences in personality and actually complement one another because they have those same aspirations, they have that same goal, and they both want to get to the same direction. Now, the second type of compatibility you will have to build is called role compatibility. So as we saw with regards to personality, a certain level of similarity can certainly help us work with people. But in some cases, it can also be beneficial to work with people that have certain different behaviors. So, for example, it can be beneficial, let's say, for somebody who isn't a natural leader, who doesn't want to take the lead in the relationship, to work alongside somebody who really excels in doing that and thrives within that leadership position. But you have to know what type of personality are complementary and which will lead to a gain in productivity. So we conducted another study in at Access First. We found 8 roles, 8 competencies, 8 skills that were complementary to each other. Now, they are either oriented towards a task where you'll find people that want to make the project move forward, or either orientated toward relationships. So people who want to interact, enter into a relationship with others, and really make a connection. So these are the following 8 that we found. First off, the doer. So that's someone who will work with precision and thrive for accuracy. Now, what you can probably relate to is, I'm sure, somebody, if you think about the team that you work with, or team, sub-team that you work with, or the team that you manage, you can more than likely think about an individual that fits into one of these categories. So the doer is someone who really, really will work with precision and thrive for accuracy. We have the innovator. So that's individuals who will be innovative and easily bring new ideas to the team. The analyst here, that easily manages complexity, gets really attached and deals with the facts and figures. We then have the challenger. So that's typically your sales individuals that really strive for greatness, take initiative, and stand ready for opportunities. We then have the leader. So again, directing the team, affirms relationships with others. There is then the team player. So this individual really cares to collect the opinion of each of those individuals on the team. We then have the connector. So easily connects with other team members, easily approaches others, is the connector between all of those individuals within the team. And then finally, we have the regulator. So this is the individual who easily manages stress within themselves, but also of others. And what we found in the study is the absence of one of these roles will be detrimental to the overall results of the team. And in theory, all of these roles need to be presented, in different proportions, dependent upon the scale of the task and the type of the task that the team has to complete. Now, if you want to build a team that is effective thanks to diversity, and if you want to get all of the benefits from diversity, you will have to build a team that is orientated around all of these roles, and ultimately identify within that team for each person what skill they can bring, what skill they can develop, and what they can do and how they will do it in the form and the shape of the team. You also need to study the balance at a collective level to see ultimately if a team is well balanced enough across all of the different roles within it. But to do that, you need to have the right tool. And this is where Access First could be of interest to you. Now, I'll now show you how you can use our solution, Access First, to really focus on increasing the diversity within your workplace, looking at creating teams that are diverse, and ultimately the main goal being finding teams and creating teams that will work effectively and become high performing across the long term. So where to start? First, a little reminder of our approach here at Access First. So our tool, what it does is it allows you to assess either external candidates to a role in your workplace or an internal team member, so looking at the tool for use in internal mobility. And it will really be able to tell you how successful somebody will be within a specific role. So out of all of those individuals that you see apply for a role, or all of those internal team members, which ultimately will sit in this top right-hand quartile of this graph here, looking at level of engagement, level of happiness versus level of performance. And that's our aim, to help you find these individuals who are really engaged, or really want to come to work on a day-to-day basis. Their personal motivations match with those of a business. And because of that, they will be performing above and beyond the expectation. How do we do that? Well, we focus upon potential. And when we consider this idea of potential, there are 3 aspects of an individual that we feel absolutely crucial to actually define. The first is, slight technical issue here. The first on the right-hand side is personality. So we look at how people behave in certain situations. Now, this is based upon the Big Five theory. We look at 20 different personality traits and 12 key behaviors. That's where a lot of tools then stop. We take it a step further because we feel in order to really establish the full potential of an individual, we need to also look at their motivations. So this is going back, talking back over the study and the different types of diversity that I just spoke about. What do candidates want to do on a day-to-day basis? How do they want to do it? In what kind of environment? And how does that link to what you have to offer as a business? And then finally, reasoning. So this assessment isn't necessarily an IQ test, but it looks at measuring the level of mental agility of a candidate. What type of information can they process, at what extent, at what speed? Now, the three assessments are called brain, drive, and shape. All three of these combined, and we are able to tell you the natural talents of an individual. Now, each test takes quite simply 10 minutes to complete, and you need not get every candidate to take all three assessments. We can then take that a step further. So you've got their natural talents, you've got in theory that profound diversity in a report, in facts, in figures, quantified, defined. We can then take that information and compare it to a predictive model. And that predictive model is ultimately what good looks like within your company. What traits, what motivators, what drivers do you really need to see within a candidate? And that sort of information is able to tell us how somebody will perform in terms of their specific job, their tasks, their missions, their projects, on a more global scale of how they will work within a team. Will they be part of that diverse, high-performing team that we spoke about earlier? How will they get on with their managers and their team members? And then finally, how they will actually fit within the specific company culture. Now, candidate experience is really, really important for us. Like I said, each assessment takes 10 minutes to complete, and this is a sample of what the assessment actually looks like. It's engaging, it's fun, and it's slightly gamified as well. What we feel is really, really important is if somebody is going to be taking our assessment, spending up to 30 minutes to take the assessment on your behalf, then they should get something back in return. And so this is a snapshot of the high-level report that they all receive access to once they've completed the assessment, whether they are successful or not with your business. What's great as well is they've got the option to share this on LinkedIn and share this in-depth report. So again, all you would need is a hashtag your company or hashtag your recruitment campaign, and you've got a good association there from a company perspective saying, okay, we consider your CV, we consider who you are in terms of your previous experience, but we also consider your natural talents. We consider that profound diversity and what you have to offer to our business alongside where you've gone to school. From a recruiter's perspective, so from a user perspective, we also find it really important to actually make the tool easy to use. We have certain functionalities here. You can see a recruitment campaign, which really is able to identify all of those candidates coming through and contrast and compare each candidate to each other to really make sure that we're saving time in the recruitment process. Here we have the magic button, which simply sifts through those candidates interesting to see, so that you again can make sure that the time that you're sitting down with those candidates is efficient and you're asking the right questions. Here we're going to now delve into the type of information that we can produce when thinking about this comparison between individuals and the actual predictive model, the what good looks like that you will have created. Here you can see we provide a global scoring, so 69% here. That's telling us that Emma here is going to have success within the role of a sales representative at a level of 69%. Now, what's really interesting is we also delve into Emma's performance potential when it comes to her success and also her commitment potential. So, in other words, do her personal motivations align with that of the business? You can see here very visually as well. This is an example of what we call the personal radar, which is just focusing for now upon the shape assessment, so the personality assessment. Around the edge here, we have the 20 personality traits that we assess through the shape test. You can see those areas in green is where we'd wish to see a candidate scoring, and those areas in red is where we wouldn't necessarily wish to see a candidate scoring. Now, please note that green doesn't mean good and red doesn't mean bad. Not at all. It's all about what comes easily and naturally to a candidate, and whether, quite simply, that fits with what you're looking for within a business. You can see here as well the kind of grey spider web. That's the candidate's pure results. So it's really easy for you to be able to contrast and compare what you're looking for versus what a candidate has to offer for a specific role. And you can see here that it's all in written format as well, really making it easy to use from a recruiter's perspective and easy to understand. The tool isn't necessarily or doesn't necessarily assume that you have a psychology background. Now, I know exactly what you're going to say, but hang on a second. If you're using the same predictive model, then who's to say that actually you're not going to be recruiting clones? Because you're right, same predictive model to compare all candidates or internal team members against each other, there would possibly be that assumption that you would be leading. You would lead and inevitably recruit the same type of individual. So when considering this question of diversity, we have run a study and looked at a selection of individuals who have all scored 70% when looking at that comparison between individual pure results and a predictive model to see what are the similarities between these individuals, and are they all clones? Are they all the same individual? So we've taken the following individuals, like I mentioned, who have all scored 70 out of 100 when comparing their individual scorings to a predictive model. And actually, when we look at the individual profiles of these 6, when considering their personality, slight technical issue again, you can see here that they have a lot of different things to offer. They are not completely the same at all. So you can see that the grey spider webs for each of these individuals, well, they're completely different shapes. And we can see from that how different each of these individuals' personalities are. Yet, please remember that they have all scored 70% when thinking about the predictive model, that comparison between their pure results, their pure scorings, and the predictive model. When we then take it a step further and we look at the origin of their studies, you can see that they have all studied something completely different at university or higher education. So when looking at this, these studies, again, talking about this mid-diversity here, what's their previous experience? What's the university? What sort of university did they go to? What did they score? You can see we have a business psychologist, a philosopher, finance, international trade, fashion designer. So when actually we focus upon who a candidate truly is, so this idea of looking at their personality, this idea of looking at their potential, their mental agility, and their motivations, we can see that we find diversity when looking at their mental agility, drivers and personality, even more so when considering the educational path that they have followed. And that links back to the fact that 60% of people in the survey that we asked said that there wasn't a large enough candidate pool. They weren't seeing enough candidates coming through, yet 61% weren't considering diverse profiles. So why not think of opening up that talent pool, really considering that atypical profile and moving away from just assessing that mid-diversity, that focus upon university, that focus upon higher education and previous experience. Now, we can then take this further and look into their actual key behaviours and see how they differ in their positioning of key behaviours that we assess in the shape assessment. So here, for example, you can see how they score individually in their work ethic. So again, all over the place. Their emotional management, all very different. Social approach here. So you can see one individual, Richard, stays in the background. You've got some in the reserve section, some in the sociable, some in the friendly section. So in all 4 quartiles. Collaboration, so management style, again, completely different. Capacity for feedback, here as well. Stress management. And so what we have done is we've asked our science and innovation team in the office to put in place and calculate what they have called the level of diversity in the group of these 6 individuals. So this, for example, just putting it into sort of everyday practice, this could be a short list of candidates or a group of team members. And it's actually a functionality which is not yet fully developed, but we're working behind the scenes on developing this, hopefully to come out toward the end of the year. We've created this diversity ranking. So this diversity rate, in theory, 0% is defining those who are most similar, so minimal diversity, and 100% is representing the greatest level of diversity, so therefore represents those who are completely different. Now, we have calculated a ranking of each in the group. First off, if you look at the first line here, just looking at the shape assessment, so the analysis of personality. And then we've taken into consideration in the second line here, consideration of the 3 aspects: shape, drive, and brain, personality, motivations, and mental agility. We've then taken the scoring of that team to really establish if, both individually and collectively, there is diversity. And actually, you can see here, diversity scoring of minimum 70% difference in diversity across the whole team. So like I mentioned, the closer to 100, the better. And overall, if you look at the team there on the bottom right-hand corner, 79.7% diverse. So that's pretty much highlighting that, yes, a group of individuals can score the same scoring when comparing their pure results to a predictive model, but there is still an average of 80% of diversity across the team, meaning that actually only 20% of their traits, when considering their personality, their motivation, their mental agility, are considered the same or similar. Meaning that actually this idea of only recruiting clones when using predictive modeling, well, it's false. So that's it from us for this webinar. I can just see now we have a couple of questions that have popped up throughout the presentation that I can quickly answer now. We have time for a couple, I believe. As I mentioned, I'll answer these, but any others I'll send through an email directly after the webinar. So taking the first one here, let's see. So how to get hiring managers on board with diversity. How do you get their buy-in? So to get their buy-in, I guess from our perspective, education is key. So being made aware of the situation and the facts and this different idea of what diversity and different results and improvement in results that diversity can bring. I guess if they're able to understand those reasons behind why it's important, then in theory they should be better to understand, or they will be able to better understand how it's important to consider this element of diversity. I guess equally, if they're presented with a tool that is able to help them to achieve this focus, it will be a lot easier to actually get their buy-in and understanding. Second question now, how can we increase diversity in senior management and leadership positions and internal mobility? So I guess the first thing is to consider for that, kind of linking back to the other question, is really looking at the different requirements for promotions and for those leadership, those senior positions when they're required to be filled. That would be a starting point, just to really think about opening up what those focuses are. I don't know. I'm not sure what you actually have in place today for that person who actually asked the question. But I guess going back to what I spoke about really finding and looking at who an individual is above and beyond, somebody's previous experience, education, within an existing or similar role, that would be really, really interesting to really increase that level of diversity. And I guess just looking at, okay, who's followed that typical career path is, picking or choosing somebody for promotion who's followed that typical career path, is that posing the question as to whether that will be the best focus, the best way of really looking at diversifying a team. I think we've got quickly time for one last question. So, not enough diverse candidates to choose from. Okay, so I guess that goes right back to the beginning of the presentation when I mentioned about that 60% saying that there aren't enough candidates, and then the 61% looking at the fact that they don't look at atypical profiles. I guess you need to look to widen your talent pool, and for that, yes, thinking outside the box. Again, linking back to what I've just said, the fact that looking at your requirements from a candidate, maybe looking at opening those up. You could consider going to different events, as was sort of highlighted in the survey. Focus upon maybe different elements of diversity, so the 3 different types, and look to partner with some companies who can help broaden your reach of candidates and the reach of those who ultimately will apply for those roles. I think that's all we have time for today. Like I mentioned, any questions that weren't answered, I can send those through. We will send those through to you later today in terms of responses. Thank you very much for your time. As I mentioned before, please feel free to check out Access First on LinkedIn. And if you wish to find some more information, please feel free to get in contact via my email here, rguinchard@accessfirst.com. We would certainly love to hear from you. Everyone have a fantastic day, and hopefully we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.